Hi, welcome to the Life of Education podcast. Today we're here with Miffy Edlund from the Physio Centre in Dubai. Hi, Miffy.
Good morning.
Hi there.
All nice and early on a Friday morning.
Yeah. So Miffy, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are as a physio and what your practice is about.
Sure. I'm an Australian physio. I've been in Dubai about 10 years, and our focus is sports and orthopaedics. We're based in Healthcare City, and we tend to look at joint and muscular injuries. So you're looking at lots of knees, lots of backs, lots of necks in Dubai. And at the moment we're seeing a bit of an issue with what I have coined the term over-yogering. Feel free to change. Over-yogering.
I over-yoga all the time.
Yeah, we're seeing it in a particular sort of way, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because it's a concern, and we're seeing it a lot in the clinic, and it's growing over the last probably 3 or 4 years, and it's really hard to treat, and it takes a lot of time, so it's becoming more important.
Maybe can you explain to everybody what over-yogering is?
Yeah, so to me there are 2 types of over-yogering. The first type is doing too much too often, literally practicing daily, the body not getting the chance to recover, and also the body not getting the chance to do a cross-training, like a strength session, which when we're becoming more and more flexible, we need more and more strength. And the second is this new thing I think we're seeing out of places like Instagram, where it's this isolated postures. But yoga was formed to get a strong body, mind and spirit, and the body was supposed to be in balance. And now we see these yogis doing extreme postures on the internet and then teaching you how to do the extreme posture. And that's what we're seeing. People practice over and over to get a specific asana. And there's no balance in doing a specific asana. So that's when we're getting sort of these hip pains and knee pains from overdoing it.
Yeah, I see that a lot on Instagram with handstands.
Yes.
There's so many, and when you look at a traditional practice like Ashtanga, you've got the handstands like in 3rd series.
Absolutely.
You don't practice it until you've been doing like 10 years of yoga.
And even after practicing it, you're going through stages of practicing it. So you're building up the strength in the hands, you're building up the strength in the shoulders, and what we're seeing a lot of is the strength in the wrists. We're seeing a lot of problems because handstands are currently the pose of choice. Yeah.
So what did you just say? Handstand is in the 3rd asana.
I'm not very proficient with the 3rd series in Ashtanga.
What is the 3rd series? Just explain to some people.
Basically, Ashtanga is a form of yoga, and it's a practice that was developed by Patabi Joyce. Well, he didn't develop it, but he was the one that brought it to the West and made it really famous. And it's basically a sequence. You have like primary, second, third, A and B, and you practice the same sequence in Ashtanga, and you practice it. You're meant to practice it 6 days a week. The 7th day is rest. You practice it every morning, and in a traditional way, it's practiced at about 4 in the morning, and if you do the whole thing, it can be a 2-hour practice. It depends on the pace that you move at, and the set sequence you do over and over again. And the thing is that you do one, say for example you're a beginner, you learn Surya Namaskara A and B, and you do that for 6 months, and then the Mysore teacher is going to teach you the next pose, and the next pose might be like, I don't know, something else, a standing posture like Trikonasana, so you do triangle pose, and then like 2 or 3 months later you might learn B, and then you learn C. So in a traditional format, over the course of a year you're going to learn the whole sequence, but you're learning it in really small increments, and it's taught very differently today.
But you're given the time to develop, progress, and you're given the time for your joints to adapt, for your muscles to come in and to support your body. It's not taught. This is the pose, now get yourself into it.
Yeah.
So
in whatever means possible.
Yeah, and what I think is also important is what we're seeing in the clinic that I'm here today concerned about. We're not seeing teachers. We're not seeing true yogis. We're seeing Western
weekend warrior yogis.
Weekend warrior yogis, yeah. You know, and they want to be yogis, but they never follow through from the physical into the spirit and the mind. So Caroline's telling you how traditional yogis develop. I see, as you say, the weekend warriors who literally jump in and do hardcore yoga without any base,
Right.
without any strength. And that's any sport. That's what's going to lead to injuries.
So when you mentioned the term over yogering, it's like too much flexibility? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it comes from two things. So we tend to look at people in terms of flexibility, and flexibility is currently the thing that everyone wants. And we see flexibility as two things. You've either got your genetic population, who are flexible people. We all have an element of flexibility in our bodies, but some people are more flexible than others, and that comes down to the amount of collagen in your system. And collagen is a protein that's within your skin, your muscle, your tendon, your ligaments, your joint capsules, and that allows for the tissue to stretch. And the more collagen you have, the more stretchy you have. And we think that's a really good thing. But when that comes to, say, ligaments are designed to support the system, the body standing up. And when they are too stretchy, you're less stable. So we have muscles to come in and support it. So when I'm then talking about over-yogering and that population, I'm talking about pushing too far. Just pushing too far, working at the end of the range all the time, and never actually getting the strength to support it. If you don't have that strength, the compression on the bones increases, the pressure on the cartilage increases, and we end up with damage. And that sort of damage to any sort of cartilage is, to a degree, irreparable. Mm-hmm. There are certainly surgical procedures to repair cartilage, but they're not foolproof, and they're definitely not something I would choose to go for. But that's the stretchy population. What we're also...
So, sorry to interrupt you there. With that type of population, what are some of the injuries that you see commonly in the clinic?
We're seeing hip impingements. So, and I've got to be careful there, because medically hip impingement is a contentious issue at the moment. But what we're seeing is bone on bone. So people are bending too far, and they're irritating bone on bone. You're seeing joint capsule and stretch, too much movement at the back of a knee when they're going into it. Yeah. And the biggest one we are seeing is wrists. From we were talking a little bit before this about the handstand posture. Or were we talking about that in this?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, just a couple of minutes ago.
Or was it before we videoed?
Maybe both.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, we're seeing load and too much stretch, not enough support, and then you get this bone on bone, and it's painful and it's long term, and it really does involve a lot of rest and strengthening, because you need those tissues which are being stretched beyond what we call the elastic limit. Do we understand elastic limit being any tissue can be stretched and eventually it breaks?
Yeah, maybe you
Explain
can
it for people who are new.
So any tissue in the world, be it fabric, be it muscle, be it plastic, has an elastic limit where if we stretch it long enough or hard enough, it breaks. And what it might do is just stretch to the point where it doesn't come back to normal anymore, or it might physically break.
And muscles, tendons and ligaments have different elastic limits.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. And joint capsules, which is kind of where I'm going with this. But if you take, for instance, a hairband, and this is for the ladies out there, if you take a hairband and you wear it often enough and tight enough around your pony, it will lose its stretch.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And that is exactly what elastic limit is. And when you are then pushing a joint capsule that is designed to, perhaps your wrist is designed to go back, say, 80 degrees, and you're suddenly pushing it back 90 degrees. If we do that slowly and allow for connective tissue adaptation, so that joint capsule to come back each time and gradually adapt, we're okay. But if you're suddenly overdoing it, doing it too much, too often or too quickly, you actually break the elastic limit. You go through the elastic limit and no longer can the tissue come back to heal. So therefore, you're left with a loose joint ongoing, and that's not necessarily going to come back ever. So you've got to increase the strength around the wrists, the shoulder complex, the trunk to compensate for that. And that's why we're seeing these injuries that go on, and it's hard to keep someone from their sport. But what's also to remember is there are so many different ways you can practice yoga. Yoga is not just about the physical is believed to be the first step in learning to control the body, so that it's easier for us to control the body. Once we can have a strong and healthy body, we can then look at moving into the mind and the spirit. But everyone is on this physical, and they're the sort of injuries we're seeing, long-term joint injuries.
Yeah, I think like in yoga, after you do all of the physical practice, the asana comes like pranayama, so the breathing, and then meditation and things like that. And so you practice physically so that you can sit. But like, no one wants to see someone sitting in lotus on Instagram. It's not like, it's not trendy. Yeah, it's
unfortunately
not popular.
But I think I'm not a yogi. I go to yoga classes. I'm a weekend warrior with sense.
Do you have any pain?
No pain, no injuries. But I think this is where teachers can come in and provide the education. It's one thing to put yourself in a pose doing the splits on yoga, but what you could also do is put a flow on yoga showing how you got to that pose. Instead of going straight into it and taking a snapshot of it, maybe use the thing on Instagram where you can scan through multiple photos and show the build up to it.
Yeah.
And more education. I mean, I don't know about you two, but I don't often read the written word under an Instagram post. I'm much more of a scanner and a liker. But the written word, maybe if it was more concise, smaller, written on the photo, of the fact that this is a process.
Yeah.
This is not day one of me doing yoga. I've been doing it for years, and I've gone through the whats, the whys, and the wherefores of yoga, and I've got to this point.
Yeah, sometimes like a handstand practice can take someone like 5 to 7 years to like develop.
Completely.
And then you're seeing this beautiful image on Instagram, and it's like, oh, well, like
why can't I do that?
Yeah. But it takes a long time. Like,
and I think if we take the handstand, for instance, I think particularly you look at the practice of the handstand, and the first thing people show is up against a wall, nice and close to a wall, either facing or away from the wall. That's like so far down the track of learning a handstand.
Yeah, I know, like downward dog.
Yes.
Like start with downward dog.
Exactly. Yeah, to get load, to develop shoulder control where you're supposed to be when you do the handstand.
Yeah.
But that's not being promoted.
Yeah.
And what is being promoted in a handstand is, instead of being bent backwards with your feet sort of either behind or in front of you, then they need to be vertical. So therefore get yourself closer to the wall to teach yourself vertical. But that doesn't teach you anything about hand position or shoulder position.
There's a similar parallel issue in the CrossFit industry with handstands, and that's different. That's an more extreme version, but it's the same thing. Day one, you're in, you've got a wall, put your hands on the floor, throw your legs up against the wall.
Yeah.
And then work from there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of issues creeping out of that.
The only thing from a physio perspective that I would say from that is, with a CrossFit population, you tend to have more the people that we consider the stiffies or epigenetic. They develop their body according to what they do. So have you heard of the SAID principle of training?
Just go through it there again.
SAID principle is specific adaptation to impose demands. So the idea that the body, I had to think that through.
No, I was going to help you. I know.
You typically say the SAID principle.
Yeah.
So the idea that by doing something, your body will adapt to doing it. So if it does something new, it will learn to adapt. With repetition, it will learn to adapt to that new movement pattern or strength required, whatever it happens to be. So when I was talking before about we call them the floppies and the stiffies in the physio world.
It's very Australian term for that.
Not ideal. Also in the Australian physio world, in the fizzy world, down us Aussies, with our floppies and our stiffies.
Yeah, quite possibly. But the stiffies are the opposite of the flippies, the floppies. Oh, this is getting confusing. They don't have the same natural collagen amount, so they are typically tighter. But being tighter sounds maybe a little bit negative, but at the same time, being tighter also means more stable. So there are positives and negatives to being a floppy and being a stiffy. But the stiffy population, they are the ones that we're tending to find.
Sorry, this is just...
shall we call the tighter population?
Yes.
Right.
It's just this Australianness. You guys abbreviate every
we do,
every
and
fifth word.
Yeah, fourth. I think it might be. But we tend to find these are the ones that will adapt. So they're the ones over yogering, doing too much too often because they're desperate to develop this flexibility. And gradually their bodies are, sorry, I am going to come back to the CrossFit. I'm kind of going around in a loop. But when it comes to the yoga, they're not giving their body any time to recover. So they're stretching the connective tissue, and they're the ones that are at the risk of breaking the elastic limit as well from doing it too much. Coming back to the CrossFit population, I would probably prefer the CrossFit population to do handstands than off the bat than the yoga population, because the CrossFit people tend to be more your stiffer population. That's why they've kind of, this is just my opinion, that's why they've naturally moved toward something like CrossFit as opposed to yoga, because their body is tighter, and I wouldn't necessarily say stronger, but it will develop strength perhaps a little bit more easily. And when they go into a handstand, they probably have more strength there to stabilize themselves in the first place. They maybe don't have the movement, but they've got the strength to do it. So part of me thinks I'd prefer to see that population move into a handstand than the yoga population, and I'm talking very generally here, but the floppy population that are having difficulty developing the stability.
So can I go back a little bit? You mentioned that there was a couple of different groups within the yoga population. They're genetically very flexible. What other groups?
Well, that's what we look at, the genetically and then the non-genetically, or the epigenetic. They've developed the flexibility to do yoga. So literally there are two populations.
So is that when you say they're genetically like lax ligaments, when you hear that term, that's someone who's just naturally, I've seen a lot of, not to generalize here, but whenever you go to like workshops in Australia, you see a lot of the Asian population, and and it's like, how can you do that? You've been practicing a day.
Yeah, I think though that's also getting into makeup. Different populations are made differently. It's why you tend to see sprinters coming from an African background, because they develop what's called fast twitch fibers. So big quads, deltoid, big bum really quickly. That's their strength. Whereas you look at an Asian population and they tend to have more collagen through their body, which makes them more flexible naturally. And that's why you see them sitting on their feet. Here in Dubai particularly, you often see an Asian population, they can sit on their feet for hours, and I can't even get down there.
Sit in a deep squat, for the day.
And to me, it's as a Caucasian, I don't have that flexibility. So I can't get down there, no matter how much. Well, I don't practice that much. I'm sure if I practiced more with a progressive program, I would get down there. But naturally, my body doesn't go down there. And that's, I can't do anything about that except practice and apply the said principle where I adapt things to the imposed needs. I was going to say something before about dancers. So this is where we've kind of learnt about these genetically floppy people. And dancers are a mix because they're naturally floppy and then they push it even further. So years and years ago this is probably even just before I was at university, so 5 years ago? Last week I finished. It came out through the Australian Ballet, and this is where Pilates became very popular in Australia. And what they were finding was that once dancers retired, they were coming out with lots of painful joints and injuries. And they weren't necessarily getting injured, but the damage that had been done to their joint system during their years of dance was coming to the fore, because they had gone through years and years of flexibility training, but also strength training because of dance. They were able to maintain their posture. They were able to support the joints. And once they retired, the strength training went, but the flexibility was there. The flexibility, they had trained for so long that they had essentially broken the limit.
I had a case when I was first starting off as a fitness instructor last week.
Yes.
And I had this really overweight guy come for a consultation. We were talking about everything. And I just mentioned the word flexibility. And he said, there's no need to worry about flexibility. And we were both standing up. He just put his toe in his hand and he put his foot up beside his ear. And I just stood there. And he was like very overweight. Yeah. And I just stood there and I was like, okay, I'm just going to tear up everything I know
Yes.
about flexibility, and we'll come back to
And
this.
start again.
Yeah. But there's an interesting sort of thing that I tell people about the difference between flexibility and mobility, and you might be able to kind of fine tune this a bit more. But like flexibility is almost the ability to get into a position, just as in, there's a railing. Can I put can I just swing my heel up on top of it and reach my toe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's me flexible, I can touch my toes. But mobility is the idea that, can I stand slowly, lift my leg up, gently put it onto the rail, slowly reach forward, tip it, and come back, all under control and under a contraction, rather than just momentum and moving. And people, when I started in the rehab, I couldn't understand. It didn't make sense to me why yoga people were getting injured. I was like, well, you're all flexible. What's going on? And it was a lot of the stuff with the Grays Institute, where that you kind of move to end range. Move to end range, slowly control, then you come out of end range. That triggered it for me, that like people, I've done a few yoga classes, but I haven't done anything advanced.
He's a weekend warrior.
Yeah, monthly weekend warrior. So I know, like, and I'm a stiffy for sure. So I know, like, okay, this is level 1, but I see the pictures that you guys are talking about. I'm like, okay, how did they get there? I've no idea. But I know when they would come into I used to do people treatment room, testing their muscle length tests, and they're straight into end range. And it's like, why have you got a sore back? Why? Like, your hip flexors aren't tight. In this position on the table, your hip flexors aren't tight. Your rotation's not tight.
Yep.
So I'm trying to figure out for a long time. And I remember specifically a group of girls I couldn't help. I was like, I don't know this. You'll have to go see somebody else. And then I started to understand more about when you take the muscle to its end range, it's at its weakest.
Absolutely.
So when you sort of connect the two dots, like, there's the in-depth actin and myosin theory, but you can go with this simple analogy of if you're carrying all your shopping bags, this is one I would tell people, if you're carrying all your shopping bags from the car,
which we all do,
which everybody does it in one go. So you either do it with a straight arm, and there's no way you can move those bags, or you bend your elbow, you have the muscle in the middle range, and you've got not a lot, but you've got a bit more room to move. So the muscle's in a much stronger contraction, indicating when it's at its longest, it's way weaker.
Yes.
So just taking that as the outcome of that. So when you have this huge back bend, not only do you have sort of your hip flexors on full length, but you've also got your quads, you've also got
your hip joint.
Yeah, with the hip joints in that final range. So it's at its most vulnerable, and it's needing its most support. But you've also got all the other muscles at their end ranges, and they're not going to be able to support.
Yes.
So you get away with that once or twice, because your body's inherently able to maintain a level of robustness.
Yes.
But then you stay there for a long time, and the body decides, right, we don't need to control this. We're just going to stay here. And then there's also,
and that's what I'm getting at as over yogering.
Yeah.
And someone like Caroline would have gone through the process of developing the strength to control at end of range.
Yeah. And then,
but even for me, like, sorry to interrupt you, like, I remember, like, with vigorous practice, like, my wrist, the back of my knee, and the only thing that would get rid of that is not practicing for 2 weeks. Like, I would leave it, not practice for 2 weeks, come back to it, and then be like, okay, everything's fine again. Or doing like weight training or other things,
cross training.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That helped a lot.
Yeah.
But that's just what I found worked for me, because if I did like continuous practice with no rest or with nothing else, like, I could get so flexible, but then at the same time I felt so unstable.
Yes.
Where I needed to like bandage my knee because I felt like I was just going to collapse to the back, or just crazy things, like even there's postures where you take a leg behind the head and stuff, and that used to be fine, but man, my hip after was like, whoa, this feels like it's just going to go fall apart into separate pieces.
Yep.
There's also the so combining what we've just said on top of, I can't remember the technical term for it, the kind of, it's not the stretch reflex, but it's the idea that when you take a muscle to its end range, it's got an elastic recoil.
Okay, it's a creep. No,
I can't remember the physiological term.
Okay.
So taking a standard strength exercise like a chest press, you come down, muscle tightens. The first bit of the contraction is like an elastic recoil to get you out of that end range to protect the joint, generate a small bit of momentum, and then your active energy usage comes in and you contract, and the muscle moves. And that's, I imagine, designed from an evolutionary perspective, that when you're chasing herds over long distances and you're running,
the momentum is kicking.
So when the like a marathon runner, when the knee comes back behind the body, the first bit of contraction is elastic, effortless. So it's an energy conservation tool. So when you take a marathon runner, you actually don't want them to be so super flexible, because we need that contraction, that elastic recoil to help them every stride of their way. So that's inbuilt, that's useful. Now you're telling the person to get into that position and stay there.
Yes.
And you're switching off that recoil.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that bodybuilders try and train for. They try and train to turn off that recoil. They pause.
Oh.
So that's because they want to contract. They want to do as much.
They want as much active movement. Yeah,
exactly. They want as much muscle contraction as possible. So down eccentric, tearing up the muscle, tearing up the muscle. Pause. The elastic recoil switches off. So then that 2 millimeters is energy usage contraction.
Okay.
So this is what I realized was going on with the yogi, these over yogi weekend people, is that they've switched that off.
Yes. The way you talk about the muscles with the shopping bags, I tend to talk about it in the clinic with fingers, and I'm going to try it here. So muscle, when it's at rest, sits like that. It literally is these fibers fitting in between each other. And when I decide to lift the shopping bag, there's a chemical that goes between to form bridges, which shortens the fibers. They come together to contract the muscle. That's quite normal. Then I decide to stretch, and I stretch out to here. I don't stretch any further than that, and that's a good stretch to release. To actually turn off the chemicals, you need to be stretching for 40 to 60 seconds to turn off those chemicals to say you can stop relaxing now. You can stop contracting now. What I tend to find with, exactly as you said, the population that we're talking about, they're not stretching to here, they're stretching to here. So actually they've almost separated the fibers, so the ability for the chemical to cross between the fibers is not there. It'll come back, don't get me wrong, it'll repair and recover, but they are stretching and holding, and they're holding for longer than a minute, so they're turning off the neurotransmitter which tells you to contract the muscle. So then they come out of that and there is no support, and for the next, to be honest, I can't tell you how long it takes for the recovery.
Well, this isn't technical, but from experience, I've done like yin yoga where you stay for poses for 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I'm probody the worst yogi then.
Why?
Well,
I've not the worst yogi, but the worst patient.
I'm the over yogering. I've been in postures for 5, and the amount of I don't have the strength to lift my arm back out of it.
Oh, when you finish.
Yes, when I finish the posture. So you're there for 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, my arm can't lift itself off. Yeah. And it takes like a good minute or two. Yeah. And you slowly like pull it out, and you're like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it loses its strength.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. It loses the ability to contract. That's what happens. Yeah. So the active ability to support yourself is gone. I think also when you're talking about things like yin yoga, I really like yin yoga. I don't do it terribly often, but I think it's very beneficial. But it's important to note as well to get connective tissue adaptation, to get the body to adapt, you don't need to go to end of range. To get the stimulation, there was a study that came out in 2011, I think it was published in 2012, in the Sports Medicine Journal, and it came out of an anatomist in Scotland, and she was studying engineered connective tissue, which we understand to be very, very similar in behaviour and structure to animal connective tissue, and clinically we think it's probably pretty accurate in terms of what happens to our bodies. But she showed that by stretching for 10 minutes or by loading a connective tissue for 10 minutes, you got the maximum collagen response. It didn't matter if you loaded at end of range or partway through range, but by loading it, you got maximum response after 10 minutes.
Maximum response?
Maximum collagen production response. And then
Can you explain what that is exactly?
So that's the body's cellular activity. So much like you do a set of bicep curls, ideally what's happening is as you load it, the tissue is actually tearing and repairing. And then it takes several days, depending on the amount of tearing you've done, to recover. But what all it is the body's way of energy production and developing. When I talk about sort of activity, that tissue has been loaded. It's kind of being torn. I don't want to say that because, of course, it sounds much worse than it is, but that's a natural phenomenon. And then it recovers. And what we know is in 10 minutes, you get the maximum response. And then it peters off, it drops completely. And it won't become responsive again for 6 hours. Okay. But the thing is, that's the time issue. It didn't matter in her study, it didn't matter if she did the heaviest load possible or a moderate load.
And can I ask as well, when you say 10 minutes, do you mean time under tension?
Yeah, time under load.
Yeah. So not like she did one set, she sat on her phone texting for 3 minutes.
No, it was more, say, when I then read the study, they were using time under tension exactly as a weighted program, because it was a scientific experiment.
So that might be where just on that, that's a case of like, pick an exercise, pick a bicep curl.
Yep.
You pick up the weight, clock on.
Yep. Yes.
You do your reps
But you would count the entire set. Yeah.
So let's say you finish that first set at 45 seconds.
Yep.
And you're fatigued. Put the weight down, clock stops.
Yes. So this study I'm talking about, this is one of their limitations.
Right.
They haven't gone into the practical aspect of it.
So what did they do in the experiment itself?
They used these engineered connective tissue, and they held it under tension.
Oh, so it was like a stretch.
Yep.
Almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But they did them under extreme stretch, they did them under mild stress, and it didn't make a difference. So when we then go back to you doing your yin yoga pose, and yin is about pushing the body, but it's not necessarily about pushing the body to the nth degree.
No, it's also a passive practice. It's a lot about getting your parasympathetic nervous system to like chill you out.
Yeah. And to stimulate parasympathetic also doesn't mean going to end of range.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think we are overdoing it. And for too long, I'm sure people doing handstands are lasting longer than 10 minutes. So why? Why not look at it and say, okay, so this study is suggesting this. Let's not take it to the exact measurements that this woman did in her study in Scotland and so forth, because it's not necessarily practical. But why don't I do 10 minutes now before work and then let my body recover and 10 minutes after work? Because you doing it for half an hour, what we're showing is you're not getting any benefit. In fact, what you could be doing, and this is another direction we need to go, is by overloading when you're not getting any response, are we then leading you to breaking that elastic limit?
Yeah, I've got two things to say. One is a question. The first one is, I think it's very important to understand who the person is and then be able to say, okay, this type of practice is the best for you. Because if you're looking at the stiffies, yin yoga would be a great practice for them because they're very tight.
Yep.
But if you look at people who are very hypermobile and less stable, maybe yin yoga or some of the very, very aggressive types of...
Yeah.
Well, aggressive is not the right word.
More active?
Yes. Types of practices that push you into end range might not be the best thing. They might need something to support that as well before they do that.
More like a vinyasa flow that keeps you moving. That keeps it. Yes, you hold it for a certain period of time, but that's an active hold, and then you move through it again. Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about the person, where they come from, what they're trying to achieve, what else they do. Because as you mentioned before, that you often found that weight training helped.
Yeah, it did when I was feeling like that, and a lot of rest too.
As a physio, we're very conservative, and we're always looking at prevention. And I'm not going to say we. In my clinic, we are big believers in moderation and in cross training, mixing it up. If say a yoga person, in my opinion, needs to do some sort of impact training or weight training, because that's what's going to create the stimulation into the body to support itself. And then the same thing, if you're a runner, I definitely believe that you should be running, your 3, your 4, maybe your 5 times a week if that's your choice. But you need to incorporate into that some sort of active rest, be it swimming or a yoga class,
Yeah.
to balance you out.
Some sort of rotation work.
Yeah, that's right.
At least once a week.
Yeah. And sorry, go.
No, I was going to sidestep. Continue what you're saying about the cross training.
I can't remember.
Oh, sorry for interrupting you.
I think cross training is really important, so important, because you see people even who do weight training and they need to do something like in yoga.
Oh.
They need to stretch.
Absolutely.
So that's a really important point.
What I was going to ask was, so the stiffies tend to know that they're stiffies.
I think you're loving the stiffies
Yeah.
more than we're loving the stiffies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If only I could
We're
pretend to be Australian. Yeah,
Australianising
I could
you.
take all your terms. So people who are stiff,
Yep.
they know that they're stiff. Do you know? So they like,
Yeah. Oh,
like,
absolutely.
"Oh, I can't touch my toes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The people who are mobile know that they're mobile, and people who are flexible, they know. Like, let's take the two spectrums.
Yep.
And then you have your people in the middle who are sort of, but take the people way at the end of the floppies.
Yep.
How do they know that they're, so they know they can get into all these poses, and so they're sort of getting away with it.
Yep.
How do they know, or how could a yoga instructor, teacher, identify, okay, you are a genetically mobile person, so you're sort of walking the tightrope now because
Yep.
you've been doing this for however many
Yep.
years, and you're genetically a stiffy, so we can keep kind of pushing you, because I know there's the hypermobile tests.
Yep. The Baton and the Del
Can you
Mar.
guys explain those?
Go
Oh,
for
you're
it.
looking at me. Okay, there's the one where, and the microphone's gonna be hard. You can go thumb to
Baton.
your wrist as the first one.
All right, I'm going to try this.
You've got a few. We've done this before.
This way?
In the front,
That way?
make your wrist turn your mouth.
Yep.
That way?
Yep. One.
Yeah.
Other side. Baton, you do both. Two.
Okay. Okay, and you go little finger.
Yeah.
Is that 90
It's gotta
degrees?
go
Yeah,
90.
I'd say.
So little finger has to go 90.
Yep.
Which mine definitely doesn't
Three.
do.
Neither does mine. And the other side? Four.
Okay, go elbows straight.
No.
So
don't get a
the
point there.
hyperextension elbow is where you see a big bend, which is very important when people are in their inversions.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to identify.
What about
Okay,
the other side? No, so you don't get
are
a
you
point
dead
there.
straight? Like bump, lock it.
Yeah.
So in that position, you would be strong
Yeah.
through your wrist, elbow, shoulder, because the force is linear.
Yep.
When you have a hyperextended elbow, you've got a buckle. So now the force and the elbow wants to buckle the opposite way, which puts huge stress on your elbow structures. So the wrist has to just work overtime. The other one then.
Knees.
Oh, there's the
standing
knee
up.
hyperextension as well. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I hyperextend.
I think your knees.
So can you pop your knees
yeah.
back?
No. No.
You're sort of standing on a little thing on the ledge, but you're not even close to it.
No.
And then the third one is, can you go palms? Not the third. What are we on?
Yeah.
6. Can you go palms
Palm
on
to
the floor?
Yeah, that's easy, but I'm in a dress. Is this appropriate?
Well, you could face the camera maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 5. 5 out of 11. What have we missed? Is that right? We've missed something.
We didn't definitely do 11.
There are, I think it's 11 moves though, isn't it, Baton?
Is it right and left?
Right and left, except the one is the palms to floor.
Oh, yeah.
So
There's
those.
is there a foot one? Because I probably fail massively on those. My foot does
foot one.
nothing now.
But you would fail it when we look at your history and say, okay, you've had surgery, so
Yeah.
that's not in the.
Yeah.
That's a off the list anyway. We can't use that as an outcome. Because we're trying to find out, like, what's your genetic makeup? Like, are you naturally hypermobile?
Yeah.
Because now, so you've already been safe now in your elbow zone. In my view, I'm not a yoga person,
Yeah.
but I'll be like, okay, when we do overhead, upside down things, your elbow's okay.
Yep.
So
Let's load up. Let's start gently loading the wrists and the
Yeah.
shoulders because we'll be safe. Yeah.
now, if you have a hyperextended elbow, it's a tricky one. Do you want them to come back into neutral and then overload their musculature, and then any failure you're going to get is probably going to be like elbow flexor, elbow extender control?
But you're so mid-range.
Yeah.
Like injuries tend to happen end of range,
And at speed.
and at speed
Sometimes.
But I guess the injuries I'm seeing in the clinic regarding today, they're not speed injuries. They are overdone, long-term, long hold injuries,
They
and
also
they're
pop
happening
up
at
like-
end of range.
Sorry to just go, but they also pop up when they've gone for a run with their boyfriend, or when
Yeah.
they played volleyball. Do you know? They didn't happen in the studio.
Oh no.
It doesn't. That's not where people get injured. It's like, I decided my friend wanted to go to this circuit class or this other thing, and I'm just not feeling right since then.
Well, the other thing we're seeing, the ones we're seeing are coming in and they're saying, yeah, no, I don't feel any pain during yoga, but by the end of the day, I started feeling this hip pain, and now whenever I wake up, I feel hip pain, and now when I walk, I feel hip pain, and they're still going to yoga. Yeah. So it's not necessarily even an injury. It's the development of pain. I'm just going to go back to something you said before about floppies knowing they're floppy.
Yeah,
to be honest, a lot of floppies, and I'm not talking about yogis, I'm talking in general, a lot of floppies don't even know they're floppy.
Yeah, so this is what I was trying to get to the point.
A lot of floppies are the type of people that don't do sport. And they don't do sport because they were never coordinated, and they could never get strong, because they need a particular program to get their base strong before their arm is strong. So they're not going to be throwing a baseball because they haven't got any strength through the trunk to begin with, or the shoulder. And that's where you need to develop it first. So we see a lot of people coming into the clinic with injuries who are not sporting. They're not active people. And you'll say to them, do you exercise? No, I'm not much good at exercise. I can't, I'm not strong, and I'm uncoordinated. And that's very typical of a floppy, because they can't control. And again, I'm making it sound like they're going to fall on the floor. No, but when you add load, when you impose more stress on the body in some way fails.
Yeah, no.
No, but so yeah, you've reminded me why I brought all that up in the first place.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Like, how do we know? How does a person who's taking a class say, instead of going to someone, more.
Yep.
You're doing great. Keep going. Look, you came in here 2 weeks ago. You couldn't touch your toes. Now you're touching your toes. Like, instead of just saying all is better, or continue to stretch, or continue to push on, how does an instructor say, okay, you are doing great, but I can see from this position or from this position that you're inherently hypermobile.
Yep.
So you're gonna have to. It's not a like it might be. You're gonna have to do some strength training. Like you're gonna have to buy into some other practice as well to get you strong. How does somebody impart that? How do you identify it and then get the person the right solution?
I think in a class environment, doing the Baton score that we just did with Caroline, or the partial Baton score, because
what was the rest of that? Do you guys know?
Moving on.
Yeah, we're running out of time.
Well, and to be honest, if I'm right, I think Baton is no longer considered super accurate. I think people are now looking at Baton and thinking it's a little old school and it's a little generalist. So I don't think it's accurate anymore. So I think it would be unwise to go on and confirm the full program.
Yeah. But
the conclusion is I'm partially flexible.
Yeah. So,
but I'll be looking, taking instead of saying you're A or you're B, you're hypermobile or you're not, you can use it to say your elbows are strong.
Yes,
okay?
Exactly. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
And my knees are strong.
Your knees are good.
But I also have it and this goes back to what you guys were discussing, like for years, obviously before my accident, but even after, like I was really flexible straight after my accident.
Yes.
I can put all that
I can attest to that.
Yeah, I remember you coming into the hospital and how close can we, and I was doing these, just so everyone knows, Miffy and I would play this game. What can you do?
Well, just so everybody knows, Miffy helps Caroline with her recovery.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed.
So when I was in hospital, Miffy used to come and we used to have like a physio session. At first it was like, can you do this with your leg?
Yeah.
And you would
and
move
it would
my
be the
leg.
simplest.
Yes.
It would be the simplest activity. Yeah.
Can you wiggle your toes?
Could you?
Nope.
No, I don't think I could do anything at the time. But eventually, after like 2 months of laying in a hospital bed, I got so bored. So Miffy was like, let's see what you can do. So the first trick is like, can you draw your left knee, which was the not broken leg, into your chest? And I would bring it right into and the right leg could do nothing, but the left leg was like an acrobat.
Yeah, it was. It had no strength, but it had all the movement.
Yeah.
And had you not then rehabbed, you would have been at risk of loading the hip joint too much, loading the pelvis. Well, the pelvis was its own little thing, but loading the knee too much, Yeah.
But anyway, so what I was going to say to that is that before my accident, I was very fortunate enough that I was always practicing yoga and Pilates together. Always meant that, say you were practicing, and this is what you see sometimes in studios where they have Pilates and then they do yoga at the same time, doing it simultaneously. Whenever I felt like, I didn't start practicing yoga until about 2 months ago now, because I was too weak all the time, all straight after my accident to until about 2 months ago. We're talking about 2.5 years of not doing any yoga because I was so weak.
But that's also because you understand where yoga comes from or what it's aiming at. And you're the perfect person to do it because you have the education that you were even holding yourself back. And that's what I'm getting at. That's what I want instructors to be telling people, that, just because you can bend and put your palms on the floor doesn't mean you're at that level. And that means maybe you need to be staying at that level for an extra month, even though you think you've got it nailed. You can't, just because you can do it, you can't just keep moving through the system.
It's important to know your body massively.
And bringing into the different yoga types, I think that's also important. Mixing types of yoga is good because some are good for flexibility, some are good for strength. And just because you might be awesome at yin yoga and you can do every pose to the nth degree doesn't mean that you are strong. And we put you into an Ashtanga class, beginner's Ashtanga class, and you may fail miserably because you don't have the strength and the ability to control your body.
I know. Like, I felt that a lot after, so I had like Trendelenburg gait for a very long time. My whole right pelvis was so weak. There's no way I could go into a yoga class whatsoever. And that's just personal experience. So I think it's interesting in that regard to, cross-train, to do both things, to do whatever it is that your body needs. And like, say you have an end goal. So I want to be able to be flexible. Well, how can I get there in a really balanced and supportive way, doing a few different things.
Absolutely.
For people who want to do those handstand. Because I think at the end of the day, if people are exercising, you want to encourage them to continue to exercise and to be healthy.
Very fine balance.
I agree. To find something that they're passionate about and they feel like, great, like, I love yoga, I'm not going to give it up. And I know sometimes there's times where I'm there and I'm like, oh shit, this is not good. But I'm like, I'm doing it anyway. So it's important to find an outlet for people, find something that you're passionate in, but then find a way to do it safely.
Yeah. And getting back to your point of how can teachers know and what can they do and so forth. One, with it, and Caroline, you'd understand this, and you understand this from your work as well, but not necessarily through yoga. With practice and with experience, you can pick a stiffy and a floppy like that. Like, if you think of your patients, even though you maybe haven't heard the concept today, if you think of who you're working with at the moment, and you could put them into groups. Because of experience. So the first thing is it will come very quickly to you as to who is a stiffy and who is a floppy. And I think for the people in the middle, and I'm definitely in the middle, I'm not completely inflexible, but I'm not super flexy either, and I'm in the middle. You don't really need, as a teacher, you don't need to worry too much about me unless I'm the one throwing my leg up, coming every day, and I'm holding every posture to like ridiculous positions. But the ones you should be focusing on perhaps to start with are the ones at the end of the spectrum. And they're the ones that you need to discuss with them. What else are you doing? What are you doing outside of yoga? And take 5 minutes to have a chat with them. What do you want to achieve? What are you here for? Because particularly your floppies will need education on what they can do. They're probably not the ones that you can say, go and play football once a week with your mates. They're more the ones that you're going to say, and I'm a big believer, I think yoga and Pilates work beautifully together. Because if you break it down, and I know I'm going to raise some hairs here, to me yoga is more a flexibility practice, Pilates is more a stability, strengthening practice. So the two together are almost symbiotic from where I stand. So those people that are particularly floppy, one, they need to understand what yoga is. It's not just about being flexible and putting your hands on the floor. And you need to also encourage them to be cross-training, to get some impact into their body or to get some weight training into their body.
Let me ask two outside observer questions. if somebody goes through a full yoga, like the thing you were describing, the levels, what did you call them?
Through the Ashtanga.
Oh yeah, it's
level.
an Ashtanga practice.
Okay.
But just remember that, like, now when you're doing an Ashtanga practice now, most people will never get through the primary series. You'll stay on the primary series for a long time. It's only if you start going to India and doing Mysore practices with like the gurus.
Right.
Sharath, I think, is Patabi's son now. He's the one that's teaching the whole Ashtanga lineage. Yeah.
But all types of yoga have levels.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to ask is is there a way, let's phrase it differently, is there a way to achieve global strength in the system through yoga only?
I believe so. I look at the yoga teachers that I see that learn from beginner level, and they don't go beginner level on Monday and then 3 weeks later they're on medium level. They're doing, as Caroline said, they're doing 3 months at beginner level to move up. So they are making sure that they have every posture under control and they can hold the postures. So it's not just about achieving, it's about can you hold it and can you hold it with control. So I believe that yes, if you take people, I'm not going to say yoga teachers, I'm going to say true yogis. Can I say that?
Yeah.
True yogis, I believe they can
As
get...
opposed to weekend warriors.
Weekend warriors.
Right.
Or, I mean, I think nowadays you are seeing some teachers that are more physical based. And I'm almost tempted to...
What do you mean, physical based?
So yoga is about the physical,
I know
the mind and the
yeah.
spirit.
I'm with you.
And I'm almost tempted to suggest changing the name of yoga these days and having names like, I go to physical yoga or popularized yoga or whatever it happens to be, because
We have this discussion a lot. I keep telling, like, there's popular yoga, and then there's actual, like,
Yes.
there's yoga that's practiced in a very different way as opposed to a class of 20 people and one teacher that's done a 200-hour teacher training.
and that's why I'm saying I think true yogis achieve
Right.
body control, full body control with their practice, yes. And that's why I don't want to say about teachers, because I'm sure some teachers, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Look,
but not all.
I'm a teacher too, and I've done some ridiculously stupid things. Like, I admit it straight off the bat. I've seen photos on Insta. Yeah, I can do that. And then I try and I'm like, whoa, no, I cannot. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I've tried,
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. People that, and you're probably one of the people that could try, but what we're seeing now is people that really shouldn't try.
I'm a, like, metal person. I can't try this stuff anymore. No.
Robotic.
Robotic. I am robotic.
Because what I find, sometimes I get people who, they want to get, like, I'll get rehab, not patients, but kind of like people who have back pain, whatever, knee pain, shoulder pain, and they want to get into the gym because they feel weak. They feel like, I want to get strong. And it's the kind of stereotype of, say, a female who could do either.
Yep.
But she wants to get a little bit stronger. And then she starts kind of discussing, like, should she go and do yoga? Is she strong enough for yoga? Like, is she flexible enough? And obviously yoga will take you down the path and improve on all of those things. But I think a lot of people think if they want to just be a yoga practitioner, they just need to get strong for yoga. So they just need to get strong to hold this pose.
No, that's not the way I look at it. Caroline's probably got a better opinion on it than I do.
No.
But I certainly think, no, I think it comes down to where you're going to practice your yoga and who your teacher is and what your class is like. But in the true sense of it, you can start as a beginner. You can start as a floppy. I've never done exercise before because I'm uncoordinated and I'm weak. And I believe that's where you can start with yoga. I don't think you need to get strong for yoga. If you go to the classes that are 20 people big and we're going to go through this vinyasa flow and has everyone done it? Great, let's start. And no one actually pays attention to whether people have done it or not. That's when perhaps you need a base level of strength. But for true yoga, I don't think you need strength.
I think that's why it's very important in studios to like really level out their classes and be like, this is a beginner class. This is like a foundation. I have some of my dearest friends are yoga teachers. One of them, I hope she doesn't mind if I mention her, Liz Terry. She's an amazing yoga teacher, and she's very, very, very advanced. But when she teaches at such a accessible, very like base level, so that people can get strong to do all of these segments. So for studio owners, it's important not to just have like this is yoga mixed class for everyone, where you've got like super advanced people and then some very, very beginners. I think in that regard, then it's like, you need to get strong to do that, because that's crazy. But if you're starting at like a beginner level, then I think my personal experience of it is that yoga's for everyone, and it can be, and you don't need to get strong for yoga, but it has to be the appropriate level. You have to go into like learning what downward dog is. Can you hold downward dog for 5 breaths? Because I remember when I started yoga, downward dog would kill me. 5 breaths in downward dog and my shoulders were like shaking. So,
and I think like if I'm going to get on a really conservative, I don't want anyone getting injured type thing, I believe that you should stay in a beginner's class for a certain period of time. Like there should be limits, like you should be doing, and I mean this is never going to happen because yoga is more an art form than a science, so this would never fit with their methodology. But you must do 3 months beginner training. I kind of want to say that because we're seeing these, and they're silly injuries. They're
Who do you
things
see injured? The new people or the
new to mid? No, mid. Like they're not amazing, but they're practicing regularly.
Right.
Yeah, that's who we're seeing.
And then, so I got back to my second question. Does Pilates give you a global level of mobility?
So going back to when you discussed flexibility and mobility, I've never thought of them. I've never thought of what I think of both of those. I guess if I was to say it from my opinion, flexibility is exactly as you said, the ability to just touch toes and so forth. Mobility for me would probably be more about joint-based, which means that flexibility perhaps is more muscle-based. But I like the way you put it, and I would probably talk about your mobility as having control. So I believe that Pilates has the ability, done well, definitely has the ability to promote all body mobility, or as I would say, control. The whole point of it is sort of efficiency and learning to control the trunk, the central areas, and the central areas could also be a knee for foot mobility, but learning to control those central areas to allow for mobility elsewhere. So yes, I believe it definitely has. If we use your term of mobility, which I like, I think Pilates.
Well, my
definitely
analogy,
has the
what I
ability.
tell people, and this could be wrong, but this is how people can digest it. There's two guys in combat. The flexible guy can lift his leg up and put it on the guy's shoulder and leave it there. The mobile guy can lift his leg up, kick the guy in the shin, and then can bring his leg back and put it back on the floor. There's a difference in those two things.
Yes, I agree with you.
And you want to be mobile, under control.
Absolutely.
Whether you do, and then you've got to be able to do it slow, and then increase the speed. And then turn that speed into power, and then high level stuff kicks in.
And then kick the man.
And then hopefully he falls over.
Knock him out.
But there's a big difference between like the ability to go, I can touch my toes, and I can slowly bend down all the way to
Shoulder
the floor,
down,
tip my floor, and then I can stand back up, and everything is just as it was before I leaned over.
I think it's interesting because I don't know if you recently saw that. I think it was called the deadlift challenge, where people were, because in the physio world we have this fear of lower back flexion, so the bending over. We have this fear because a lot of back injuries do come from excessive lumbar flexion, and that's sitting at work on the desk and loosening the structures. It's funny because it's exactly what I'm talking about today, but not using yoga. It's sitting at a desk. But again, the structures at the back are getting stretched beyond their ability, and eventually they break, and we get weakened joints or we get disc herniations. It's the same thing. But recently there was this challenge, I think it was on Instagram, called the deadlift challenge, about going into lumbar flexion. And lumbar flexion is not a scary move. We are designed to do it. but we're designed to do it under control and muscles supporting us as we go into lumbar flexion instead of just sitting and hanging on our connective tissue.
There's a very good exercise which I sort of keep quiet because a lot of people should go nowhere near it. It's called the Jefferson curl, where you stand upright.
Can you show us?
Is it on a step?
There is one version on a step.
I'm sure actually it's not called the deadlift challenge. I'm sure it might be called this one.
Well, there's one I can't really do it and hold a microphone, but you would stand up in neutral. You've got a bar, or you're better off standing with like a piece of plastic piping to begin with, something very light. You go chin on your chest, you curve you flex your neck, and then you curve your shoulders together, so you slowly curve your kind of your upper back, and then you go all the way down. The bar stays nice and close to your leg. And then you just roll your lower back down, and as you get to the bottom, then you kind of stretch out the bar at the base. But on the way back up, you start from the very bottom vertebrae.
Like a roll up.
Yep.
In standing,
Like
so
a shoulder bridge, a Pilates shoulder bridge.
So I'm thinking
if
like
you
standing.
rest your microphone down, stand up there, just face sideways. Okay, so now you're just going to your hands by your side. Just go chin on your chest. Now slowly, just curve your shoulders in. Yeah, very slowly now. You're going to go just vertebra by vertebrae, down, all the way.
My chest is going to go.
Okay, so following that pattern all the way down, but then on the way back up, you go first vertebrae
Through the
straight,
lower back.
then next one, so you unroll.
And then I do this.
No, stand up again.
Okay, yes. Let's do that.
So so you roll your chin down, then you'll curve your. So if you just turn slightly more sideways to the camera, you're going to roll, tip forward, all the way down, and then there's a little bit of advanced piece down the bottom, but then on the way back up, everything stays curved from the kind of midsection up. You just fix the lower back, and then the next one, and the next one, and then you just tip straight.
Yeah, in Pilates we call that a roll up, standing roll up.
So on YouTube in the gym world, it's called a Jefferson curl.
Okay, yeah.
Where it's a gymnast thing.
And this is the deadlift challenge I was talking about. This is the exact move.
Now this
is it with load? Do you do it with load?
So eventually you take load, because this is going back to what we spoke about earlier. This is all of your posterior chain muscles almost pretty much all of your posterior chain on full length.
Yeah, but working eccentrically.
Yeah.
So controlling.
So when you then jack that weight up, like it's not an exercise that you substitute to get strong for a deadlift. It's just an exercise that you would do to fire up all these smaller muscles separate to a deadlift. Because you'll see people in that back posture doing a poor
like
deadlift.
The erector spinae.
Yeah, multifidus. But getting QL to work without panicking.
Yeah.
Getting the erectors to work all synchronization, so that should you ever go to a deadlift and you veer out of that neutral as you get high level, as you get 300 kilos in the bar, if those muscles know what's happening, it's not the end of the world.
Yep.
You would expect somebody who lifts 300 kilos to have had all the physical adaptations from 250, 200, 150, 100 kilos, that their core and trunk is robust enough to withstand a little bit of movement or a little bit of poor technique.
Yeah.
But that's at that high level.
We use that move to break the fear of flexion. Because and I take full responsibility as a physio. We sometimes encourage this fear of lumbar flexion because of what we see a patient come in with, and then you're sort of sending them off into the world, and you can see they're in this massive extension and bending over. Everything's about the knees. The lumbar spine is designed to flex.
Yeah,
it's supposed to flex.
It's the
amount we do it.
It's also so. This is my personal philosophy: is there's no wrong exercise at all that your body can do, but there's wrong load
and wrong repetition.
So in relation to the load.
Yeah.
So because we can move everywhere. We can move. I can turn sideways and then rotate all the way around and then put my knee over there, like you can see in yoga. But I can't do that with a 50 kilo bar in my hand. So if I understand what muscles are working in different segments of the body that's moving, then I know, well, all right, I'm bending my legs so I could take a bucket load of weight because my quads and glutes are working, but I'm actually throwing my spine completely out. So the weakest link in this chain is now QL, erectors, multifidus, all these guys.
Yep.
So
which
I have
are all they're designed to support the spine. Yeah,
they're not designed to eccentrically, concentrically control all these joints. So I need to sacrifice the load. So when I'm doing the Jefferson curl, I'm absolutely going to move. As long as the caveat here is, as long as there's no underlying disc issues, which you sort of need to be aware of.
You need to be aware of, but at some point, depending on the disc, there's nothing wrong with going back into flexion. If you've got, I completely agree with you. If you've got the muscular support there to do it, there's nothing wrong with going in and doing it. The body, the same with posture, you know, good posture is nothing. And you can sit anywhere you like. The way I look at it is, how long do you hold the posture for? You know, if the body can move into a posture, so what? Bad, good. But I don't stay here for very long. And I think that's the big thing. And you're talking about weighted load. I'm talking about the load of me staying here. It's the same thing. It's still in relation to the load. And now the load is my body. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. But I think when people start to understand the difference between the sort of mobility, flexibility, and then controlling, you knowing what muscles are doing. So if I'm going to kick the guy in the chin, I need this big open space here.
Yes.
But I need so much dexterity and control from this opposite foot, knee, hip on the other side, and core. But like, it's a different animal than just chucking my leg up on his shoulder and staying there.
And going back to where we are, that's what I'm talking about. Chucking your leg up is seeing the photo on Instagram and going, I'm doing that.
Well, it's interesting. I remember a yoga teacher in Australia, just such an amazing teacher. His name is Simon Borg-Olivier. He used to in Sydney, he owns Synergy Yoga. He used to say something, I hope I'm not quoting him wrong, but it was interesting. There's certain postures in yoga where you're standing and you grab your big toe and you lift your leg up. And he was saying once that you need to be able to try and let your body get there on its own without actually grabbing your toe and lifting it up. If you can lift your leg up to there, then grab the toe, because you know that's strength and flexibility. And
that's badass strength.
Totally.
That will put
But it always stayed in the back of my mind, because there's a lot of postures like a lotus, Padmasana. So you get into the lotus pose and it's like, can you get there without your hands putting you there?
Yanking, you mean?
What's the lotus pose?
Yeah, sorry?
The cross, the typical.
Yeah, so you put one ankle here, you put the other ankle here.
Oh, okay. The little emoji.
Yes, the emoji.
He said, I don't use emojis.
You don't use emojis?
No, I don't use emojis.
Oh, dear. We'll have a whole other podcast on emojis.
So there is an emoji that's new, and it's a yoga emoji. So you type yoga into your little thing, and someone sitting in lotus pose comes up. Yeah.
So that's lotus pose.
Yeah.
Give that 10 years, a lotus is going to be hijacked and called emoji. These popular yogis are going to come in, these weekend warriors are going to go, oh, this is the emoji pose.
Yeah. It is.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I totally agree.
Massively.
But I agree with you. Like, I do lotus pose, and I am yanking. There is no grace, there is no control, there is no elegance.
Yeah, there's a lot of postures. It's like there's another posture where you're standing, you put yourself into half lotus and then you bend forward. And it's like, can you put yourself into half lotus without like doing this to your leg? And I just remember him saying this.
So I'm just thinking as you're talking, that's very difficult because firstly, let's just pick the hamstring. You're contracting the hamstring, but you're also trying to
in a shortened position.
And then you're trying to override the soft tissue opposition that the hamstring is giving you. So you've got to.
That is the level of control.
That's super strong. That you might as well put a weight on the end of your.
So this was his point. When you're able to do that without yanking, then you're ready for that pose.
And that's going back to you asking, how can a teacher tell when you're ready or if you should and so forth. That sounds ideal.
Yeah.
He's
a great teacher.
Sorry?
He's a great teacher.
And you can't do lotus if you can't do it by yourself. Hands on your head and do lotus.
Yeah.
I mean, not
emoji.
Right now.
You mean do
We've got
emoji?
skirts on. Do emoji.
Do the emoji pose.
Do emoji pose. It's.
It's so sad that is so true.
Yeah.
We're going to come back here in 10 years. We're all going to be living amazing lives somewhere, and we're going to come back here and do emoji pose. Yeah.
I remembered not to wear a dress for this emoji day.
I'll wear my active wear.
Yeah. My yoga clothing. I've got some friends that, like, this is segueing entirely, but they're like, why is everyone wearing exercise clothes when they're not exercising? What's with this whole yoga fashion, like stepping outside of the gym? Wear that in the gym. Anyway.
Yeah, but I think it's also easy pick, isn't it? First thing in the morning, just get
Yeah.
the gym clothes. I can
Yeah.
just pass
At
off.
first
like I'm
thing in
going
the
to
morning,
gym.
yep. 3 in the afternoon,
Put a
Yeah.
shirt on.
put some clothes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you see people wearing like tracksuit pants, and it's like, come on, get dressed.
They're Australian.
Yeah, they are Australian.
Flip flops and wife beaters.
And trackies.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So where can people link up with you then?
I'm in Healthcare City at the Physio Centre. It's next to the City Hospital.
And then online?
Oh, online we have a website which is www.physiocenter, centre spelled R-E, not E-R, .ae.
The Aussie way.
The Aussie way, yes, or English way, I guess. And we're on Instagram
What's the
doing
Instagram?
yoga pose and emoji.
Yeah.
pose. I think it's the Physio Centre.
And if people wanted to contact you directly and you don't want to do direct, let's go with the Physio
Go
Centre.
through the Physio
Please.
website.
I love you
and-
all, but
And yeah, you might get fan mail.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming to talk to us.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
Thank you. So much,
It was a
Miffy.
really enlightening discussion.
Yeah, really good fun.
Mm.
Cool.
Amazing. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Bye.
See you.